Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, we'll break down some questions from our Mailbag Monday segment and get into the biggest storylines and players to watch for spring training. Also, what are some potential trades the Phillies could be looking to make ahead of spring training? And in our opening day countdown, we have 51 days till opening day. And if you're a true fan of the Philadelphia Phillies, I think you know who our player is going to be for today's countdown. Let's get into a lot of fun stuff and answer some of your questions on today's episode of Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm Connor Thomas, your host. Thank you so much for checking us out. Please make sure to rate, review wherever you consume your podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube on the YouTube channel, Locked On Phillies. It really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies and on the Locked On Network in general. And we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So it is indeed time to respond to some of our Mailbag Monday questions from earlier in the week and over the weekend. To jump into that, I had some stuff I wanted to get into yesterday's episode, but we'll get into the Mailbag Monday questions today as we get everything all squared away from the people who ask questions. So let's go to Twitter first. I'm also going to use a YouTube comments question. So in the future for Mailbag Monday, I may refer back to some questions in the YouTube comments and respond to those. But the first one comes from Sean Fitzpatrick, who's always the responder on Mailbag Monday. This is a great question, though. He asks, what individual player and what storyline most interests me as we approach spring training? That's a great question because everybody's could be different. It's very subjective. And it's a tough one to answer because there's so many interesting players and storylines about this team. But let's start with the first part of his question, which is what individual player, and then there's more on the storyline, interests you as we approach spring training? And I think the answer has got to be Johan Rojas. Like, he is the only guy that I think could be a major impact player on this season that is fighting for a position. Like, Marsh is fine, Castellanos is fine, everybody in the infield is fine. The starting rotation is pretty well set unless some major things change as far as trades or anything like that. More on that coming up in our next segment. And the bullpen is like they could use more pieces. There are some guys that are fighting for positions in the bullpen, but I don't think they're like high impact in the bullpen. Bullpen pitchers throw once or twice a week. If Johan Rojas is going to be the everyday starting center fielder for the Philadelphia Phillies, that's an impactful position. And if he can hit, huge difference in the season. If he can't hit, huge difference in the season. Like, he is going to be such an important part of this team. And I don't know if he's even going to make the team. He could end up in AAA depending on how he looks in spring training. That's why he's so interesting, right? The ceiling, the floor of Johan Rojas is unbelievable. He could do what he did this past year and be a Gold Glove caliber center fielder and hit 300 at the major league level and be a revelation for the Philadelphia Phillies and be in the conversation for like best young breakout player in baseball. Like, that's top end of the spectrum, but it's not crazy considering what he did last year and the athleticism he has. Also, well within the realm of possibility is the guy could be a really good defender and hit 220 with minimal power numbers and not look like he belongs at the major league level at all. And that would leave the Phillies with a major hole in the outfield. Like, he has such a discrepancy between what the best case and worst case scenarios would be. I can't help but say it's Johan Rojas. And I'm rooting for the kid. I really like him. I think he's shown a little bit of power potential in the minor leagues. I talked about that in a previous episode where I think he's going to hit double-digit home runs at the major league level this year, if indeed he is an everyday player in center field. I think his defense is invaluable out there in center. And I think the Phillies could really benefit from having Johan Rojas on the major league roster. But going into spring training, I'm super zoned in on what he's going to look like because he's auditioning for a really big role that could also end up in a really small one. So Johan Rojas is the individual player that interests me the most going into spring training. As far as the storyline that interests me the most, something Rob Thompson's talked about multiple times, and this has been brought up by Jason Stark when I've talked to him on the air at 97.5 The Fanatic. It's brought up by Ricky Batalico, who was our countdown winner yesterday for best number 52 in Phillies history, who works at 97.5, and he's echoed the same thing. The approach in the postseason at the plate was miserable at times from some really, really good Phillies hitters. And they have a couple guys that have a tendency to get lost at the plate from here to there. Like Kyle Schwarber's great power numbers are an asset, but the major strikeout numbers are not an asset. He needs to get to a place where his approach can be honed a little bit. Not that he's a bad player, but everyone has stuff to work on. Nick Castellanos, we know his approach has not been the same since coming to Philadelphia as it has been other places in his career. And he was an all-star this past year, but in the postseason, in that Diamondback series, like late in that series, it hurt you. And yet he had a hot stretch where he was in like conversations with Reggie Jackson as far as clutch home runs in the postseason. So I'm not saying these guys stink, but the approach of this team in that series against the Diamondbacks, mainly the last couple games, was flat out miserable. It's why they didn't play for the World Series. It might be a reason why they didn't end up winning it. Not trying to take anything away from the Texas Rangers, fully deserving of the World Series title. But I'm saying that the Phillies would have had a really good shot if they could have gotten into the World Series. It wasn't like a 80-win team versus a 110-win team. Like, I think the Phillies would have given the Rangers a run for their money. And I think the Phillies are like should have been more competitive against the Diamondbacks than what they ended up being. No disrespect to either of those teams. Both those teams deserve it. But all of this to say, the storyline that I'm looking for the most is how they change the approach in spring training. Rob Thompson's talked about handling spring training differently. And this plays into another thing, right? Slow starts. The Philadelphia Phillies for the past 2 years have gotten off to some unbelievably slow starts in the regular season. And how do you prepare to not start slow? You change what you do in spring training so you hit the ground running when your season starts at the end of March 28th to be exact. So the way they attack spring training to fix the approach at the plate and get off to a hot start to start the season are like the combined storyline that I'm looking for. So I guess I'll just rope this all together into what's different about spring training this time around. What does Rob Thompson do that he hasn't had players do in the past? What type of drills are instituted to help with approach at the plate and getting off to a fast start in the regular season that you haven't seen before? Rob Thompson already talked about getting guys a bunch more at-bats, whether they're simulated at-bats, whether they're in like non-MLB games where it's just like you get a bunch of guys out on the practice fields down there in Clearwater and you get them live at-bats, not in a game setting, whether it's playing more in the actual games in spring training. Now, you have to be careful. Remember what happened last year. Rhys Hoskins' ACL injury happened in spring training, like just a week or two before opening day. It was miserable timing, and I'm not blaming anyone for that. I'm just saying, like, let's remember what an injury in spring training can do to a season. It changes the whole complexion of what a team's ceiling could be. So I want them to be cautious, but I also want to see them be a little bit more aggressive as far as preparing these guys for the regular season. You cannot sleepwalk through the first 2 months again. You just can't. I mean, you can, and they would probably be able to get away with it because they just find their stride. I believe in this team to do that. But imagine how much better they'd be if they didn't have to make up ground and they found their stride and they were already in conversation for the division. They could run away with it. Like, I don't think anyone's running away with it against the Braves, but you know what I mean. Like, if you start hot, get hotter, it's going to be a much better result for your season. So that's the individual player and the storyline that I'm looking for the most. So thank you to Sean Fitzpatrick for that question there. The next question that we're going to have coming up comes from YouTube, and it has to deal with trades potentially for the Philadelphia Phillies ahead of spring training. So we'll get into that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. let me talk to you about passion, drive, and patience, because that's what brings home the winning trophy. And it's also what keeps your automobile alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They got superchargers, they got roof racks, they got exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Anything you can think of. You might be into speed, well, Johan Rojas. You might be into power, Kyle Schwarber. You might be into style, like Bryce Harper. Well, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're going to be burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's super easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So go ahead and check out my friends over at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, so this question, as we continue Mailbag Monday, and well, I know it's Tuesday, but the questions were from Monday and over the weekend. This question comes to us from a YouTube listener and subscriber. Shout out to Brian Pearson 9517. So a couple days ago, he responded to one of my videos and asked, are the Philadelphia Phillies looking for any trade prospects before the season starts or before spring training? So interesting you would ask, Brian, because trades have not really been a thing for the Philadelphia Phillies yet in the offseason. And this is crazy, right? Because as I sat down to record this episode at like 12:45, I had already planned on talking about that question because I think trades would be interesting. The Phillies want roster flexibility, optionality. They want guys with options. They want guys that they could put on a minor league deal. So that may mean trading someone who doesn't have options for someone who does have options. You don't normally get someone in free agency that has minor league options available. So anyway, the Phillies just announced as of 12:50 p.m. today. So this is breaking news, and I'm processing this real time, so bear with me. The Phillies have acquired right-handed pitcher Michael Rucker from the Chicago Cubs in exchange for cash considerations. To make room for Rucker on the 40-man roster, right-hand pitcher Andrew Bellotti was designated for assignment. So bad news for Bellotti and fans of Andrew Bellotti out there. Getting designated for assignment this time of year is normally not a good sign for your chances to make the team or do anything with the Philadelphia Phillies. So that is not great for Bellotti, but the Phillies have made a trade for Michael Rucker. Now, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to have to do a little bit of research here on the fly as to what Michael Rucker brings, because, frankly, this broke while we were in the middle of recording this episode, and I want to get you the information right up. So Michael Rucker acquired from the Chicago Cubs by the Philadelphia Phillies. So to answer Brian Pearson's question, as I look up Michael Rucker's baseball reference page, yeah, I think the Philadelphia Phillies are going to trade for Michael Rucker from the Chicago Cubs. Nailed it. Look at that. No, it's a great question, and clearly it was a timely question because the Philadelphia Phillies did make a trade. Now, Michael Rucker, 6'1", right-handed pitcher, and he is 29 years old. So he's not like a young guy or anything like that. So let's run through his standard pitching. We got 3 years of MLB experience. So came up in 2021 for the Chicago Cubs, spent all 3 years in Chicago. And he doesn't really have – so his free agent time frame, I guess we'll call it, he's not a free agent until 2029. So this is a guy under team control for a long time. Let me see if I can find out if he has any options on here. I don't see it listed. I imagine he would have to have options. I don't think the Philadelphia Phillies would bring in a guy who didn't have minor league options. But if I'm just looking at his standard pitching, you're looking at a guy who threw 54 2/3 innings in 2022, 40 1/3 innings in 2023. He had right around like that 4 to 5 ERA. So he had a 3.95 in 2022, a 4.91 in 2023. That's not great. That's not terrible. It doesn't look like a guy who's going to be the top end of the bullpen, but it's a guy with some major league experience. Now, strikeout to walk ratio has been right around 2.5 to 1 his whole career, so that's good. Seems that he's able to keep the walks down, control the baseball. He walked 19 this past year, 20 the year before, 11 that year. So, I mean, you look at the walks, you could cut those numbers down. Like this past season, 19 walks in 40 and a third innings. I'd rather not have him walking somebody every other inning. But if the walks are high, the strikeout to walk ratio is like 2.5 to 1. It means he's got to be striking out a lot of dudes. And he struck out 40 guys in 40 and a third innings pitched this past year, 50 guys in 54 and 2/3 innings the year before, 30 guys in 28 and a third innings pitched his first year in the majors. So basically this guy is locked into being a strikeout per inning guy. That's good. You want someone who has strikeout stuff. I don't know what his role would be with the Philadelphia Phillies. I don't know if he's going to be a major league guy. I don't know if he's going to be a guy who fits in the minors that could potentially get called up. I see him and I say, okay, he's another name in the mix. He seems like a spring training body that you could be looking at to potentially get a spot, but I don't know. It just brings you options. Now, let me see if I can look up if he has any minor league options available, because that's the important part of putting together this puzzle, is if he has minor league options available, which Bilotti did not, by the way, that would make total sense for them to do that. So let's see. He's been designated for assignment before. And as far as options are concerned, I haven't seen anything yet. I'll have to get back to you on that. I honestly don't even know where to look up that information if I'm being straight up. So when it comes to Michael Rucker, maybe not a huge move, but this is changing things around to bring in a guy that could be like he could be a body that makes the opening day roster. He could be a guy that just lives on the 40-man and excuse me, ends up in AAA. And he could be a guy that actually makes an impact at the major league level as a right-hander who is low risk, high reward. Like cash considerations, you didn't give up anything for the guy. I know it's not exciting, right? All the tweets I'm seeing already as this news breaks, I'm starting to load more and more up, but the tweets I'm seeing are, this isn't exciting, this isn't an upgrade, this isn't Jordan Montgomery, this isn't Cody Bellinger. Guys, I get it, but the Philadelphia Phillies are not going to make a big move. I've already told you that. They're going to bring in some new pieces to see if they can find a diamond in the rough. I'll tell you what I think Michael Rucker is. I think this is the Jeff Hoffman attempt from last year, right? You found Jeff Hoffman out of nowhere on a minor league deal. He ends up being a huge part. When I talked to Jason Stark this past week, he called him one of the most, if not the most dominating pitcher in baseball last year by a certain stat. Like, that's wild coming from Jason Stark. So I think the Phillies are just trying to shuffle around a couple things, bring in a couple new names that they don't know, because if they didn't trust Bilotti, bring in someone who's not Bilotti and see if he can make the team. And if he can't, no harm, no foul. Cash considerations, whatever. We'll eat cash considerations. Like, that's totally fine. And these are the type of moves I'd expect the Phillies to make if they continue to make them. Fringe roster moves. Could be minors, could be majors, could be guys that flip-flop in between, roster flexibility and optionality. That's exactly how I'd answer Brian Pearson's question, who asked us on YouTube. So thank you again, Brian, for the question. My goodness, thank the universe as well, because the fact that I picked that question and was going to answer it on a day that the Philadelphia Phillies make a trade in the middle of the episode, that's what are the chances, right? So glad I got a chance to talk about that and break that news. The Phillies do make a move, but it's a minor move. So you can let me know in the comments how you feel about it. I think it's solid. It's just, it makes sense based on what they've been telling you you're doing. It's a shot to potentially get a guy who plays above his watermark. And if he doesn't, not a lot risked. Low risk, potentially some reward move. That's fine. That's what the Phillies are going to do the rest of the offseason and through spring training. Coming up next, we got our countdown to opening day, because as the Phillies make that trade, we're only 51 days till opening day. And if you know anything about the number 51 in Philadelphia Phillies history, you know who I'm going to be talking about next. We'll get into it as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Phillies. I want to tell you about FanDuel Sportsbook first, though, and happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, I know you are, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. I mean, you got to go ahead and check it out. You could bet on everything when it comes to the Super Bowl. the Gatorade, the coin toss, the crazy stuff about like the sidelines and who's shown where on TV, all kinds of fun props and different types of bets FanDuel has available. There's so many ways for you to win. Plus, there's even normal football bets, of course, that deal with the actual game. FanDuel has bets for which player will score a touchdown, how many points are going to be scored. There's so much more, like I told you. New customers, you join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. So let's say you pay a $5 bet on some game tonight, and you win $200 in bonus bets, and you can use those $200 to wager on the Super Bowl. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so let's discuss the countdown. If you're not familiar, yesterday we started a segment. Now, I'm stealing this from Jeff Carr of Locked on Reds. We talked about it over the weekend, and he recommended that, like some other shows, start doing this. And I was like, yo, that's a great idea, so we're going to do it. He said his listeners really liked it. I hope you really like it as well. But we're going to count down till opening day. And the Phillies open on March 28th, which is 51 days away. Yesterday, 52, we picked the best player in Phillies history to wear the number 52. And for that, we picked Ricky Bottalico, who's a coworker of mine over at the station. And maybe the fact that I had to see him every day doing radio is part of the reason why I picked him. But yes, I mean, he was an all-star. He was a guy that was a staple of the late 90s Philadelphia Phillies teams. So Ricky Bottalico being on that list is totally fine with me. But now we move to number 51. And folks, if you're my age, or if you are older than me slightly, hey, listen, if you're anything older than 20 years old, you should know who I'm going to pick for the best number 51 in Philadelphia Phillies history. That belongs to one man and one man only. You may know him as Chooch, but Carlos Ruiz, of course, wore number 51 during his time with the Philadelphia Phillies. It's got to be Chooch. He was an all-star back in 2012. He was a world champion in 2008. He was a guy that was just an insanely good catcher out of Panama who caught Roy Halladay's no-hitter in the playoffs against those Cincinnati Reds. He caught the perfect game against the Marlins that Roy Halladay threw. I mean, he handled he caught the final pitch of the World Series, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, like, that's Phillies legend, Carlos Ruiz. He's amazing. So when I look at Chooch, I say, okay, that's the guy that's got to get it for 51. There's no doubt in my mind. It's been two easy picks the first up. I miss Carlos Ruiz. I hope he's doing well. One of the great catchers in franchise history for the Philadelphia Phillies. And again, most importantly, a World Series champion here in Philadelphia. The only starting catcher I've ever seen win the World Series for the Philadelphia Phillies in my lifetime. So Chooch has got to be the guy. Appreciate you being along with us. And that's number 51 on our countdown to opening day. So we've got two guys, Ricky Bottalico and Carlos Ruiz, that have been listed as the best for their number. We're doing 50 tomorrow. We'll see if there's a recent Philly that might have a chance to bring that home. But so close to opening day. I can't wait. We're under 2 months, and it's right around the corner. Pitchers and catchers report next week. There's a lot of stuff that is happening with the Philadelphia Phillies. And they make a trade today. So maybe that is like the little snowfall before an avalanche of moves that happen for the Philadelphia Phillies. We'll keep you updated on all of them. But that's all for today's episode. So thank you so much for checking us out. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the YouTube. It really helps us out if you subscribe. So if you like the content that I put out, there's no better time to subscribe. We're back to 5 episodes a week, spring training right around the corner, regular season right after that with opening day on the 28th of March. This is the time to get in so you're prepared for the season. Appreciate everyone who's already done so, and everyone who's going to do so. But that's, again, all for today's episode. I'll talk to you next time on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.